Good evening. Hope everybody's having a great week. Jimmy here in Chicago. Today we're going to talk about the Ferriola crew. This is a real tight crew out of Cicero, led by Joe Ferriola, Rocky and Feliz, Sally, Louis Marino, Bobby Bellavia, Bobby Cavone, just to name a few. These men made millions of dollars in the bookmaking, loan sharking, and a little extortion. This is one of the most lucrative, sharpest crews in the Chicago outfit. I will put this crew up against any other crew in the country, including Boston, any of the five families in New York, Philly, New York, Detroit, etc. You had men like Joe Ferriola. You'll never find a stronger leader than Joe Ferriola. His underboss was Rocky and Feliz. Then you had lieutenants like Louis Marino, Sally D, Bobby Cavone, Gabit, and others. These men got caught up in a major RICO racketeering, loan sharking, and extortion case and spent years in prison. Years, football numbers, away from their families. And most of that was gambling. Years ago, as we all know, they locked you up for illegal gambling, card games, video poker machines. Now the government controls it. One rat out of the crew brought the entire crew down. The Ferriola crew had one of the strongest crews in the outfit, mostly made members, some associates, loyal soldiers they trusted, made millions of dollars, with the exception of one bad apple. And that one bad apple brought down the entire crew. He decided to flip, cooperate, even wore a wire. Devastating the Ferriola crew. That's what today's story is about. If you guys like my Chicago mob trials, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. I appreciate all your comments. And as I said many times, the vast majority of my stories are the trials, the 25 plus federal and state trials that I went to, going back to the early 1990s. This channel is just for entertainment and educational purposes. This man, I mean, they don't make men like this anymore. You got Joe Ferriola, Joe Nagel, a.k.a. Mr. Clean. And when Joey Aiuppa and Jack Cerrone went away during the strawman indictment, it was Joe Ferriola that took over the reins as the boss of Chicago outfit. From 1985 to 1988. And then he had his own crew, the Ferriola crew in Cicero. This guy was very close with JB, Joe Batters. And when his nephew or cousin, Harry Haleman, got out of prison, Joe Ferriola gave him $250,000 cash to put on the street to get back in business, to get back on his feet again. When Harry Haleman was locked up in prison, along with Scarpelli, Joe Ferriola made sure that cash was sent every month to their families, specifically their wives. Now, according to Nick Calabrese, Joe Ferriola was one of the men present when the Splatro brothers were brutally beaten and stomped to death. Nick went on to say that afterwards they went to a diner And Ferriola told him and Ferola to cut up your gloves into little pieces because the feds can get prints off of them. They didn't know about DNA back then, but that's the testimony according to Nick Calabrese. Unfortunately, though, for Joe Ferriola, his life was cut way too short. This man had some health issues over the years, specifically heart issues. He ended up passing away, sadly, March 11th, 1989. He was only 61 years old. And I read that he had one of the best heart surgeons in the world, a guy named Dr. DeBakely. This was the best heart specialist there was. So Joe had the best medical treatment, but unfortunately, he ended up passing away. God bless Joe Ferriola and his family. But I bring him up because he was the leader of the Ferriola crew. He was also one of the most feared men in the Chicago outfit. Now, after the passing of Joe Ferriola, Mr. Clean, Rocky and Feliz took over as boss of the Ferriola crew, the Ferriola Street crew. And what better underboss boss could you have than a World War II veteran, a World War II paratrooper? This guy was built like an NFL linebacker. He oversaw multi-million-dollar gambling, loan sharking, and extortion operation they had going on. The millions of dollars he brought in, he used some of that money to pay off most of your cops, a lot of your Cook County sheriffs, some judges, mayors, aldermen. He also used some of that money to pay to the families of outfit guys and associates that were locked up. As I mentioned earlier, Harry Allman, Scarpelli. Thousands of dollars a month were given to their families while their husbands or fathers were away. Same with Bobby Cavone. So Rocky took care of his crew, unlike some of the other crews, like the 26th Street crew. When Nick Calabrese complained that he wasn't getting paid for some of the work he did, or Anthony Volpenzenzo was on tape complaining how the North Side, how Large's crew wasn't paying him for jobs he did. But Rocky took care of his guys. That's why every single one of them was loyal. They all did years in prison without ever cooperating. And according to Nick Calabrese, he claims out of the corner of his eye, Rocky was one of the men that was in the basement at that house in Bensonville when the Spilotro brothers were jumped, beaten, and stomped to death. But the defense attorneys, Tom Breen, brought up, well, Rocky and Feliz was under surveillance that day at a different location. So he couldn't have been at two spots at the same time. He basically caught Nick on the stand committing perjury. But again, a lot of these federal trials, especially if the word organized crime is mentioned or the defendants are affiliated with organized crime, the judge is usually pro-prosecution. Now, I only seen Rocky Feliz one time, and I went to his sentencing. Normally, I don't like to go to the sentencings or when the verdict's read because it's just too much at stake. It's like a funeral. But Rocky came out in a faded blue jumpsuit and shackles. You could tell he's aged. He wasn't in a very good mood. And he basically complained to the judge that he didn't believe he got a fair trial, that you couldn't believe the government's star witness, and that he was a World War II paratrooper that fought against one of Hitler's toughest regimes. But that fell on deaf ears. the judge sentenced Rocky and Feliz to a life in prison. Now, Rocky and Feliz led one of the tightest, best crews in the outfit. All of his men, captains, lieutenants, even associates, were loyal. They'd rather do time in prison than even think of cooperating or flipping, with the exception of one. One associate, a gambling lieutenant, BJ, Blowjob Jehoda, was the one that flipped and testified against Rocky and helped convict the Rocky and Feliz Ferriola crew. Now, another member of that crew, we're going to talk about Louis Marino, made member of Chicago outfit. His nickname was Tomatoes. This guy was a very serious enforcer, made millions of dollars, not only in the rackets, gambling, loan sharking, but in the produce business. They played tapes of him in court where he was threatening some of these deadbeat gamblers that owed him money. According to government's informants, rats like BJ Jehoda, he claims Louis Marino, part of the Rocky and Feliz crew, was one of the men that was in the kitchen that took part in the brutal murder of Hal Smith. And according to the other government rat, Nick Calabrese, Louis Marino was one of the men that was present when the Spilotro brothers were brutally killed. God bless Louis Marino. He passed away March 7th, 2017. This guy did 28 years in prison. He could have easily flipped during the good Ship Lollipop trial. He did 28 years in prison. Stand up man. Louis Marino, God bless him and his family. Now here we got two other made members of Chicago outfit. Stand up men. You got Sally De Laurentiis and you got Marco D'Amico. Both of these members spent time in prison, never ratted, never flipped, never cooperated, did their time like men, didn't snitch on their friends, came home for gambling. Sally D was acquitted on murder. Kind of shows you what kind of case the government had. He got convicted on gambling. Reminds me of Skinny Joey Merlino. They sent him to jail for placing a bet with a bookie. Same with Marco D'Amico. These men did several years in prison. I think Sally did 222 months in jail. Marco D'Amico did football number of years in prison. But why they were in prison, their families were being taken care of. Now, Sally D was released after doing 222 months in jail in 2006. This man is now retired. His outfit days, gambling days are long behind him. He's now retired, living life to the fullest with his family and friends. God bless Mr. De Laurentiis and his family. And same with Marco D'Amico. He's passed away just recently. God bless Mr. D'Amico, the mover. Both of these men did a lot of time in the joint, never flipped, never cooperated, did their time like men, and came home with their families. Now, another member of the Ferriola crew, or the Infelice crew, you got Bobby the Boxer Salerno. According to government informant BJ Jehoda, Bobby was the man in black. They referred to him in court. He was one of the men in the kitchen that brutally murdered and killed bookie Hal Smith. Now, during the good Ship Lollipop trial that I followed, all the defendants were found guilty with the exception of Bobby Salerno. The jury hung on him. He was ecstatic. I'll never forget seeing it on the news. He was actually shocked. However, months later, they tried him a second time for the murder of Hal Smith, and the jury sadly believed the government's witness, B.J. Jehoda, that he was the man in the black, that he was one of the men that allegedly killed Hal Smith, and Bobby Salerno was found guilty of that murder. Interesting thing about that trial was his son, Alex Salerno, who actually got a chance to meet and see around the courtroom, was his counselor, his defense lawyer. So imagine Bobby Salerno. He was so proud that his son Alex was representing him in court, and they almost beat the case. Bobby Salerno, I think the trial was back in 1995, the second trial. He was released in 2017. This poor man served 22 years in prison, was released, and passed away shortly after. I think he was 88 years old. He lived a long life. I heard nothing but wonderful things about this man. People in my neighborhood that knew him had nothing but wonderful things to say about Bobby Salerno. I remember him. I was so upset at listening to B.J. Jehoda's testimony that I actually said something out loud during a break in one of the courtrooms. And to my surprise, Bobby Salerno responded. He denied knowing B.J. Jehoda, and he called him a bum. And he told me that his son is a fine attorney. His other kid is going to law school, and his third kid dropped out of school. And then he told me, hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And I thought that was kind of funny. He told me that he's told his son Alex that before the trial, if they lose, he doesn't want his son Alex to hang his head low. He wants him to continue to become a top criminal defense attorney. That's exactly what Alex did. He became one of the top defense attorneys in Chicago. I'm sure his father would be very proud of him. But sadly, just to show you how the government is, Alex Salerno, his son, passed away while Bobby Salerno was locked up. Another tragedy of a Chicago outfit guy that loses his son, his child. And the government doesn't even allow these guys out of prison to attend the wake or the funeral, the services. I mean, shame on them. But God bless Bobby Salerno, a loyal member of the Rocky and Feliz crew. Now next, another made member of the Chicago outfit, loyal member of the Infelice crew, or the Ferriola crew. You got Bobby Bellavia, Gabit. This guy was involved in juice, loan sharking. He was kind of like a 50-50 agent, debt collector. They found him guilty on conspiracy to kill Hal Smith. According to B.J. Jehoda, he was one of the men that took part in killing of the bookie Hal Smith. B.J. Jehoda tried to actually wear a wire. They played the tapes in court, and he's trying to get Gabit and other members of Feriola's crew on tape talking about the murder, but these guys were way too smart to fall for that bullshit. He eventually was found guilty as well on a couple counts of racketeering. And he was on tape talking about men that made their bones, meaning men that did work, men that killed people, because him and BJ would kind of talk in code. He didn't know it that Blowjob Jehoda actually was wired up. I seen this man not too long ago, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago at the Taylor Street Festival. I didn't recognize him at first, and it took me a little while. And then occasionally I run into his son as well up and down Taylor Street. But God bless Gabit, everything this man has been through. He served 25 years in prison. He was finally released, I think, in 2006. Again, Joe Ferriola, Rocky and Feliz, everyone in their crew were loyal to the cult core. 25 years in prison. Now, here's a guy not so many people know about. or even hear about. A guy that flew very low under the radar, kept a low profile. You got Bobby Cavone. They call him Coco. He got pinched during the good Ship Lollipop trial as well. The government wanted him to speak in front of a grand jury. He would not talk. This guy did 18 months for contempt of court. They threw him in the MCC, which is one of the nastiest jails in the city or in the country, just like the Brooklyn federal jail, downtown Brooklyn. I've heard all kinds of horror stories of this place. But Bobby Cavone got indicted in right around 1990 for basically gambling, racketeering, bookmaking, right? And the outfit basically paid for his silence. Why he was locked up for 18 months, Rocky and Feliz and the guys made sure that his wife received a couple $1,000s a month. And then when he got sent away, he ended up doing like maybe 5 years. His family was taken care of. But that's one thing about Joe Ferriola, Rocky and Feliz, their leadership, their style. They took care of their crew. Their men that got locked up, they took care of their families while they were away. But this is Bobby Coco, still alive today. This man was in the restaurant business. And we all know what a grind it is in the restaurant business, many, many hours. But he was in the restaurant business, done really well for himself. And now he's retired, spending time with his family and traveling the world. You got to love this photo here of Coco with little. Now, there were other defendants. I think there was a total of, along with Bobby Cavone and the other co-defendants, I think there was a total of 11. And some of them were men like William, DeMonico, Jimmy Nichols. These were all 50-50 agents. So they would split the proceedings, the gambling proceedings. But again, these guys ran a multi-million-dollar gambling operation. Now, Bobby was thrown in jail because he refused to testify against Jehoda, Rocky and Feliz, and the rest of the crew. This guy ended up doing 57 months standing on his head. Bobby Cavone, stand-up guy, knock-around guy. I'm going to try to get an interview so he could tell his life story, what it was like being away from his family for those 5 years, what it was like when they threw him in the notorious MCC prison, who he was locked up with, how he got involved in gambling, loan sharking. But here we go, Coco. Hopefully you're doing well, my man. Now we'll keep going. Now they'll want a highly lieutenant in the Infelice crew. You had BJ Jehoda. I'll call him Blowjob Jehoda. Excuse my French. And he was the one guy that flipped and cooperated and brought down the entire crew and sent Bobby Cavone, Jimmy Nichols, Sally De Laurentiis, Marino, Bellavia, Salerno, and Feliz, sent all 11 defendants to jail, knowing he didn't just destroy those 11 defendants, but he destroyed their families as well. But this guy was involved in their multi-million-dollar gambling operation. He was kind of like a lieutenant. He got busted on a tax and racketeering case. I think he owed a couple $100,000 in fines and taxes. He was looking at 12 to 20 years in jail. Rather than do his time like a man, probably would have done 10 years of that. Rather than do his time like a man, he decides to flip, cooperate, and rat against Rocky and his entire crew. But that's not the worst of it. He actually wears a wire on his friends. He lures two of his other friends, one of them a very good friend, two bookies. he lures them to their deaths. He actually is part of the planning and setting up of the victims. Real nice guy, huh? I seen this scumbag testify against Bobby Salerno. I did not find him credible. He claims that after getting his friend drunk at a local bar, they went back to the house. He said, I'm going to go check the mail. He told Hal Smith to walk in through the kitchen sliding glass door, knowing some of the boys were there to give him the business. Sure enough, Hal Smith walked in, and allegedly Rocky and his crew stabbed up, strangled, and killed Hal Smith right there in B.J. Jehota's home. But B.J. Jehota not only set up his friend, but participated in the planning. He also set up another bookie, Plummer, Bobby Plummer. And B.J. Jehota testified that he never really got over the two murders. He would have nightmares about them. He actually got a little choked up on the stand when he talked about Plummer. He said he could still hear some of the gurgling noises, some of the dying noises the poor guy made as he was dying. But sometimes these low-life government informant snitches, even though they're killers, burglars, drug addicts, pedophiles, alcoholics, you can throw the list of names at them. Some of them have so much detail, and the government does such a good job corroborating everything. That's how most of the juries find them guilty. But if I was on that jury, I definitely didn't find B.J. Jehota credible. This guy was a degenerate gambler, and also, aside from owing hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, he owed some of the outfit guys and associates in other crews lots of money. I don't remember the dollar amount, but a lot of money he owed. So he took the easy way out. A real piece of shit here. I was so disgusted with his testimony during the Bobby Salerno trial. Actually talked about it out loud, and to my surprise, like I said, I striked up a conversation with Bobby. Now, the Chicago outfit really didn't have a lot of informants compared to, like, say, New York, Boston, or Philly, right? But the few that we did have, like Lenny Patrick, Jehota, Bob Cooley, Nick Calabrese, decimated the Chicago outfit, destroyed it, brought it crumbling down like a house of cards. And one of those trials was the good Ship Lollipop trial. Now, I did not attend this trial, sadly, but I did follow it on the news, on TV, and in the papers every day. This was a major RICO case against the Joe Ferriola crew, or the Rocky and Feliz crew. They had him on racketeering, extortion, gambling, and 2 murders. The murders were 2 bookies, Bob Plummer and Hal Smith. They said Hal Smith was the largest bookie in the country. This guy was bringing in $400,000 a night. Let me say it again. $400,000 a night. When the bosses found out how much money Hal Smith was really making, they kicked it up another $6,000. He refused. He insulted some of them. He was talking some shit. And both bookies, because they wouldn't pay more, ended up getting killed. Both of them were found in the trunk. Now, aside from the 2 murders, it was basically gambling. They were running a multi-million-dollar gambling operation, right? This consisted of, obviously, poker machines. They had a couple full-blown illegal casinos going on in the suburbs with crooked blackjack dealers, high-stake poker games, craps, food, women, dice games, ranking in right around $500,000 for the crew. Not too bad. They had wire rooms. They would bet on every hockey, football, baseball, soccer game out there. They had all kinds of agents, 50-50 agents, 25-50 agents. And BJ Jehoda, rather than do some time in prison, he decided to flip, cooperate, and even wore a wire. Without BJ Jehoda's testimony, Rocky and Feliz's crew would still be in business today. Now here's an interesting building right there in the Wrigleyville Lakeview area. I think it's 3660 North Lakeshore Drive. You got the New York condominium. My friend Nick, the Serbian guy I know, we used to call him Money, he had a condo there. 3660 North Lakeshore. This is a penthouse, one of a few of a high-rise that these guys owned. This is BJ testified on the stand that they had an open door policy here, meaning the wise guys, associates could come and go. They could gamble here, bring their moms here, kind of like a little side place to hang out in the city. But what they didn't know is the FBI wired it up. So here's BJ Jehoda, like that other lowlife Red Wimette, actually wire up the condo where guys like to socialize. I can't think of nothing worse than that. But this is the New York. Every time I go past this building, I always think about the Ferriola crew, Rocky, BJ, and the guys hanging out here. And only if these walls could talk. Now here we'll talk about some of the lawyers, right? In Chicago, we got some of the top defense attorneys in the business, but they're very, very expensive. I forget what the retainers are at some of these big time trials. I know it's a couple $100,000 just for the retainer, but most of the mob guys and criminals will tell you after they're convicted, they blame their lawyers. Like when Joe Lombardo got convicted in the family secrets trial, I'll never forget. He was slamming his cane down on the floor, yelling at his lawyer, Rick Halprin. But this here is Patrick Tewitt, top defense attorney that presided over the good Ship Lollipop trial. And then you got Alan Ackerman. I mean, just look at this guy. You could tell he's a character. And some of these guys are real good, but a lot of them, it's a lot of smoke, mirrors, and bullshit. But they are very entertaining to watch. But they're going up against some of the top prosecutors in the country. Guys like Patrick Fitzgerald, Mitch Mars, John Scully, Gary Shapiro, Marcus Funk. I mean, these guys, they really go after these organized crime guys. Here's the judge that presided over the good Ship Lollipop trial. You got the federal judge, Ann Williams. And I talked to Coco, Bobby Cavone, and I remember I attended Rocky and Feliz's sentencing, and I read about the other defendants sentenced in the case that she gave each defendant the maximum. She gave them absolutely no break, even the ones that weren't involved in murdering the two bookies. She handed them the maximum. This is somewhat of a hanging judge, public enemy number one to some of these guys. And I'll never forget, it's kind of funny because I used to hang out at the court building. I actually I got invited to a Christmas party that was held by this woman here, but actually seen her hand Rocky and Feliz a life sentence and then attend her Christmas party afterwards. Kind of ironic, but that's Judge Ann Williams. And then because of BJ Jehoda's testimony, the entire crew was found guilty, all 11 defendants, gambling, loan sharking. At the end, the judge found all 11 defendants guilty. I think 5 of them blew trial. They got them on gambling, loan sharking, extortion, plus the 2 murders. Some of the defendants came home. Some of them, like Rocky, unfortunately died in prison. But not one single member of the Ferriola street crew or the Rocky and Feliz crew, not one single guy cooperated, with the exception of that scumbag BJ Jehoda. If it wasn't for BJ, the Rocky and Feliz crew, the old Ferriola Street crew, who knows how many millions of dollars they would have today. But that's what happens. Our government, rather than focus on terrorism, rather than focus on cartels and street gangs, our government was obsessed with organized crime. Guys like Tony Spilatro, Joey Merlino, John Gotti. Some of them had personal vendettas to lock these guys up to further their career. That's what happened at the Gus Alex trial. You had young prosecutors making maybe, I don't know, 75, 80,000 a year. They get a little experience. They lock up a couple Chicago outfit bosses. Then they switch sides. Now they're representing Chicago outfit guys and other criminals, making hundreds of thousands of dollars. They switch sides. But that's how it is. If you guys like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Now we will do one more recap. Again, life cut too short. He led the Chicago outfit for 3 years in the 80s, but he had his own crew out of Cicero, the Ferriola crew. Their specialty was gambling, loan sharking, and maybe a little extortion. Then the reins were handed over to World War II veteran Rocky and Feliz. Oversaw a multi-million-dollar operation. You got Louis Marino, Louis Tomatoes. Did his time like a man. Sally De Laurentiis. Marco D'Amico spent years in prison. Bobby Salerno, hung jury the first trial. Second trial, he could have easily flipped and cooperated then. He would have never spent a night in jail, but that's just not in his blood. None of these guys would ever flip or cooperate, not one of them. It's just not in their blood. Right here, great photo. After they were all convicted, Harry Allman was a defendant as well. I forgot to mention that along with Marco D'Amico. Harry got Rocky and Feliz. Harry Allman, a nice thin Sally D, and Gabit. 4 of the defendants all did their time like men. Rocky ended up passing away. Harry passed away in prison. And thank God, Sally De Laurentiis and Bobby Gabit are home and alive and well. So that's a great photo. These are stand-up men. How'd you like to have these guys part of your crew? Bobby Cavone. Here's a guy. He did 18 months in the MCC just because he wouldn't talk to the grand jury. They paid him for his silence. This guy like this would rather do time in prison than rat. Rocky and Feliz and his crew made sure that they took good care of his wife while he was gone. Bobby Cavone was smart enough to go legit, made a fortune in the restaurant business, and now he's retired and traveling the world. Here's gambling lieutenant, associate, low-life, alcoholic, degenerate gambler, blowjob Jehoda, BJ Jehoda. He was the one that got in a little trouble and decided to flip, cooperate, and actually wore a wire. He testified against Rocky and Feliz and the entire crew and actually lured 2 of the murderers, 2 of the bookies to be murdered. Good Ship Lollipop trial, 11 defendants, RICO case, gambling, extortion, loan sharking, 2 murders. All the defendants were found guilty. New York, New York. This was a penthouse the feds had wired. This is where the guys used to hang out. He testified they had an open door policy. Top defense attorney, Patrick Tewitt. This guy represented a lot of mob guys. I don't think he's ever won a case. Alan Ackerman. I think he represented Sam Carlisi for a while. Here's the judge, a hanging judge, Judge Ann Williams. She gave every defendant at the good Ship Lollipop, she gave them the max. All these men did time in prison, never ratted, never rolled. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Friend of mine just gave me the Lenny Patrick testimony. I have his transcripts that I'm going to go over with you guys, and I'll share some of those with you. I hate to even bring up his name, Lenny Patrick. He's the one that testified against Gus Alex. But stay tuned, guys. Have a great week. I'll see you around.